Hello everyone, myself Yash. I'm a student of Andaman and Nicobar Island Institute of Medical Sciences. So this is basically my first video, and in the subsequent videos I'll be trying to discuss the various conceptual topics in your MBBS curriculum. So today I'll be discussing one of the major topic, that is the cavernous sinus, that is both important as well as in your MBBS curriculum, that is the university exams, and even has a wide clinical application. So let's start. This is the basic diagram of the cavernous sinus. So what do we mean by the cavernous sinus? So cavernous is basically a hollow space. So in the diagram you can see that I have demarcated an area in the blue color, but actually when it is present in the body, it's not like that. It's not a fine margin and demarcated area. So cavernous is a hollow space where the blood is present. So whatever you see in the blue, it's actually the blood, and through which the various structures are floating in it. So what will be the symptoms and the consequences of the cavernous sinus thrombosis that I will discuss later. So that will be due to the application of the pressure by this blood present in the cavernous sinus onto the structure present over here. So first of all, the cavernous sinus is a place where there is no walls. We usually have walls in the veins to prevent the backflow of the blood, but in this case there is no walls, and the CSF that is being circulated through the CNS will be drained into these sinuses, and through them they will be going to the jugular vein and then to the right atrium via the superior vena cava. Now first of all, I'll talk about its extent. So anteriorly we can have the superior orbital fissure is there. So it's logically we can deduce this, that in front it is eye. So cavernous sinus is kind of located in between in the middle cranial fossa. So anteriorly we will have the superior orbital fissure, and the posteriorly the petrous part of the temporal bone. Now boundaries from the diagram we can mainly see that there is three boundaries. The first of all, the roof, the medial wall and the lateral wall. The roof we can see that the roof is related to the optic chiasma and the meningeal layer of the dura mater. So we know that there are meninges present, and outermost is the dura mater. What happens is that at the dura mater there are two layers, the meningeal layer and the endosteal layer. So the cavernous sinus is located at a space where these both layers separates. So when there is an increased gap between these two layers, that's where the cavernous sinus is present. So we can clearly say that the roof is the meningeal layer and the optic chiasma are related to the roof. And talking about the medial wall, we can clearly see that there is a pituitary gland present over here with the pituitary stalk, and this is the body of the sphenoid, the bone that makes one of the components of the skull, having the sphenoidal ear sinus, one of the sinuses of the body. Now coming to the related to the structures, basically the nerves. So first of all, we can see there is a cranialum number 3, the cranialum number 4, and the two branches of the trigemine angle, that is the V1, the phi 1 or the phi 2, and that is ophthalmic and the maxillary. So now that's all the relations and the boundaries that we can see over here. What are the contents? Now contents are the structures that are floating in it. So these are the structures, the ICA, the internal carotid artery, and the abducens nerve, the cranialum number 6, are located in the cavernous sinus. And we already know that the sympathetic plexus is wounded around the internal carotid artery, so it will also be the content of the cavernous sinus. Now coming to the clinical application, what happens is, if there is a cavernous sinus thrombosis, like the thrombosis develops, just area of the face that corresponds to the lower part of the nose, the upper lips, and the corresponding area between these cheeks. So what happens? There is a increased tendency of formation of infective septic emboli. So we don't have since the veins in the brain, in the cranial cavity, don't have the valves. So what happens? The septic emboli tends to move in the retrograde fashion towards the cavernous sinus. So first of all, it starts from the facial vein. The septic emboli starts from the facial vein, moves to the pterygoid venous plexus, and after that via the emissionary veins, the veins connecting the intracranial and the extracranial parts, we know that already. the emissionary veins, it goes to the cavernous sinus. Now what happens at the cavernous sinus? Since this septic emboli is formed, there is an increased chance of there is a clogging of the cavernous sinus. When there is a clogging of the cavernous sinus, there will be increased pressure intracranially, which will lead to the several symptoms that we can see. The first of all, the symptoms that we see is not the first. At the first glance, we don't see the ophthalmoplegia. We tend to see the medial squint. After that, sometime we'll see the ophthalmoplegia. So there is a basic reason behind it. Since we know that the internal carotid artery and the abducen nerve are the contents of the cavernous sinus, and we know that there is a formula called the LR6 SO4 whole thrice. So what this corresponds that the lateral rectus supplied by the sixth nerve, that is the abducens, and the superior oblique supplied by the fourth nerve, that is the trochlea, and rest are supplied by the oculomotor. So what happens when there is an increased pressure? The first area or the first part to be affected are the contents. So since the content is the abducen nerve, the first part that will be affected the abducen nerve, and same abducen nerve, there is increased pressure, so it will abducen nerve will stop working, due to which there is a paralysis of the lateral rectus, the muscle that is pulling the eyeball towards the lateral side. So since the lateral rectus is paralyzed, so there is no opposition to the medial rectus. So what happens that the medial rectus tends to pull the eyeball towards the medial side, which leads to the first symptom, that is the medial squint. After some time, what happens that the increased pressure will also damage the cranial nerve number 3 and the cranial nerve number 4 present on the lateral wall. So from the formula we can see that the cranial nerve number 3 is supplying the rest of the muscle apart from the superior oblique and the lateral rectus, and even the cranial nerve number 4 will be affected, due to which all the muscles supplying to all the nerves that are supplying to the muscles at the eyeball will be paralyzed, due to which we have the second symptom, that is the ophthalmoplegia. So person will be unable to move the eye. The third symptom that we can see is the pulsating exophthalmos, in which what happens that due to the increased pressure at each heartbeat, since the systolic pressure, we all know that when there is a systole, there is an increased pressure. So when at the time of each heartbeat, the pressure increases in the internal carotid artery, which further tends to increase the pressure in the cavernous sinus area, which have a direct impact on the eyeball, and the eyeball moves or protrudes outside. Discuss the tributaries over here of the cavernous sinus. I will be discussing them in the next video. What I wanted you to know, to basically focus on the clinical symptoms that are present, that a person or the patient is presenting, why that is happening, and instead of writing simply like the ophthalmoplegia, it's better to write what happens the first, and after which what are the symptoms, the subsequent as the time moves on, what are the symptoms that starts appearing. So I will discuss the tributaries in the next video. So this is the basic gist that we can have from the cavernous sinus. What is the important clinical concept behind it? Thank you.